When she stated that, I was still dressed in black. After the funeral, the house was silent save for the clinking of teacups and uneasy whispers. The navy blue sweater my father liked to wear in the evenings when it became cold was draped over his favorite chair, which stood empty in the corner. There was a subtle scent of lilies in the air, leftovers from the funeral parlor that were already fading. As I was restocking the tray with sandwiches, my mother's voice pierced the room like a sharp blade. It was low and cutting. She currently holds no employment. It's been years since she did. She just sits here doing nothing. Right now, she's just eating for nothing. With the plate shaking in my hands, I came to a halt. Slowly, I turned, thinking that perhaps just possibly she wasn't referring to me. Everyone's eyes, however, told them otherwise. No one spoke. No one spoke, including my uncle. Claire, my cousin, was also present. Not even my younger brother, who hardly said a word to me after flying in from out of state for the funeral. After setting the tray on the table, I turned to face my mom. Her expression remained the same. She showed no traces of regret or even a hint of uneasiness. Simply dismissive, chilly scorn. As if I were furniture. As if I had been furniture all along. I didn't answer. I was unable to. My hands went cold, and my throat tightened. As I stood there in the center of the room, the others gradually turned away from me, one by one, as if it were a scene they had seen too many times. Once more, I was invisible. I had been out of work for 3 years. Back then, I coordinated business launches, weddings, and fundraisers as part of my job in event management. I was competent at it, but it wasn't glamorous. I had my apartment downtown, health insurance, and a reliable source of income. I lived a life. Then Dad fell ill. The sort of illness that begins as a drizzle and progresses to a flood, resembling a slow hurricane. A trip on the stairs. It was a forgotten memory. The silence was excessively prolonged. He had already begun to deteriorate by the time we received the advanced Parkinson's disease diagnosis. And I was the only one who could love him. Mom said she couldn't love him. My brother had a lot going on. The family did not cast a vote. I left everything as a result. I assured them that I would look after him, I'll return. And I did. I resigned from my job. I vacated my apartment. I forfeited all social gatherings, vacations, and leisurely Sunday mornings. I learned how to make meals he could still consume, lift his weight without injuring his back, assist him with bathing, and hold his hand when he was shivering uncontrollably. I became his daughter, his caregiver, and his shadow, but I was never on par with him. And he was gone now. Gone, leaving me with nothing but a mother who treated me like a smudge on her spotless living room carpet and a handful of grief. I entered my room, the guest room, and sat on the edge of the bed the day after the funeral. The walls remained empty. I hadn't done any decorating. Even after 3 years, I never felt like it was truly mine. My bags were still partially unpacked and piled in the corner. I reflected on everything I had refused. I reconsidered the job offers I had turned down. I became estranged from my friends. To be there when my father called for me in the middle of the night, believing that I was his mother, or perhaps a nurse, or occasionally, not a thing. All of that had now been condensed into a single sentence by my mother. She only eats for free. I ought to have spoken up. I ought to have spoken up for myself. However, I didn't. Rather, I sat on the edge of the bed and gazed at the floor, wondering how I had shrunk so much in the regard of those to whom I had given everything. Grief is said to transform a person. Perhaps, though, I had been evolving all along, silently, slowly, like a simmering saucepan. I did not shed a tear that night. I refrained from screaming. I made no attempt to clarify. I simply lay awake, repeatedly repeating what she had said while gazing up at the ceiling, eating for nothing, as though love had a bill, as though sacrifice had a cost. I believe that's when I recognized something had broken inside of me. I didn't express my feelings too loudly. The tone is not one of anger or fury, but with icy, unyielding accuracy. They were still unaware of it. However, I had evolved. I also had no intention of being silent any longer. I used to believe that my family's treatment of me was the norm before my father became ill before. I gave up everything. One child always disappears into the background. I assumed that was my only responsibility. I was the oldest. I was the quiet one. This individual takes responsibility for their actions. The one who had already worked things out and didn't require recognition. However, being ignored does not equate to respect. I simply wasn't aware of it at the time. Max, my younger brother, was the center of attention when we were kids. He was the perfect child, loud in a way that people liked, witty and charming. Once, he blamed the wind for breaking a vase. Mom called him clever and chuckled. I was grounded for a week after spilling juice on the carpet. I received straight A's at school. I'm proud of you, yet I never heard that once. Simply excellent. We anticipated that outcome. What happened when Max passed his driver's test the second time? To celebrate, we went out to supper. Thanksgiving was always around the time of my birthday. The house would already be filled with family, chaos, noise, and the scent of turkey. The number of times people have forgotten my birthday is incalculable. My aunt once handed me a half-empty bottle of lotion when I was 16 because she didn't want it anymore. 2 months later, Max received a new smartwatch. Nevertheless, I remained silent. It's all right, I told myself. All those things were unnecessary for you, I told myself. And perhaps I didn't. However, the message was unmistakable. They didn't try to find me. Max was always the one who made decisions for the family. He was always the one to decide where to spend the summer. Should we paint the kitchen a particular color? Who inherited the larger bedroom? Mom didn't even ask Max for assistance when Dad became in need of full-time care. She simply assumed that I would provide assistance, as I always did. I can recall the exact moment when everything finally made sense to me. Dad had been ill for 6 months. I had sat with him on the bathroom floor all night, waiting for the tremors to subside after he had fallen in the hallway again. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and my back hurt. I begged Mom to help with breakfast so I could take a nap when she eventually arrived downstairs. You don't have a real job right now, she remarked, glancing at me. This is the reason you are here. I never forgot that sentence. This is the reason you are here. No, thank you. Don't let me take over. Simply, anticipation. As though being the one who cleaned up the mess that no one else wanted to handle had been the main purpose of my life. As Dad's condition worsened, I continued to provide. I became proficient in handling his prescription drugs. While my friends went on weekend getaways and shared selfies from their vacations, I filled out insurance paperwork, sat through every scan, and drove him to all of his appointments. That year, Max came twice. Max only visited once, on his father's birthday, only for an hour before leaving with his girlfriend, and that was only once on Christmas morning. Mom didn't mention the incident at all. However, she advised me to persevere and be dependable when I missed a doctor's appointment due to a migraine that was so bad I could hardly see. It's funny how people always want the person who gives everything to offer more. I continued to wait for a recognition moment. I'm grateful. I see what you're doing. Silent. It was just a glance, nothing more. However, it never materialized. This was particularly evident when I had to sell my automobile to cover the cost of one of Dad's medical procedures. That weekend, Dad suffered a seizure, forcing me to miss my best friend's wedding. Not when I began skipping meals because I was too tired from caring for Mom and him all day to prepare meals for myself. I would occasionally wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the ceiling, wondering, is this what it means to be a daughter? Not affection, not assistance, just a duty. Perhaps they'll understand once he's gone, I persuaded myself. At last, people could appreciate what I had done. One. However, all I received after the funeral was that he simply ate for nothing. That was my prize. What did I sacrifice all those years for? There was no expression of gratitude. There was not a single word of kindness to be found, just a leech's label. I considered returning to my previous position, but the industry had changed. Too many years had passed. I had lost my connections and felt disconnected. I attempted to get in touch with an old coworker. She was courteous but obviously aloof. Now things move quickly, she said. You will need to catch up. Make up lost time, as if I'd lost a race I didn't intend to enter. I received a message one evening from a friend I hadn't spoken to in a long time. She asked how I was after seeing a picture from the funeral online. I was unsure of how to respond. I simply stated, I'm surviving. You've always deserved more than survival, she said. And within me, something broke. This was not done in a clamorous, theatrical manner. However, this is done in silence, profoundly. It feels as if an old chain is loosening. That evening, I went for a stroll. It's just down the street. With no specific destination in mind, the cold air brushed against my face. I realized something while standing there, watching leaves blow down the sidewalk under a flickering street lamp. I had spent my entire life waiting to see someone, awaiting selection, waiting to be sufficient. I also felt exhausted. I'm exhausted. I didn't come up with a resolution that evening. I didn't yell, weep, or curse retaliation. No more, I muttered to myself. Don't wait any longer. Give up expecting others to change. I'm no longer burdened by their demands. There has to be a change. Additionally, this time, I would be the first to do it. There was no scream to bring about the change. It wasn't a dramatic argument or a scene from a movie. The action was subtle. Keep quiet. But it's obvious. I told Mom I was busy the first time she asked me to go get groceries. It was a falsehood. That day, I had nothing urgent. However, I allowed myself to be unavailable for the first time. She seemed unsure of who she was talking to, as evidenced by the momentary pause in her voice over the phone. The guilt trip followed. Are you occupied? With what? I assumed you were unemployed. I didn't answer. I simply hung up after saying, I can't today. The ensuing quiet was oppressive. I chose not to call back for clarification. I disabled the family group chat notifications the following week. I had enough of passive-aggressive remarks. I was tired of sitting in front of the TV, eating reheated rice and gazing at Max's pictures from another beach holiday. Silencing them all felt like removing a tight bandage from a wound that had never healed. I went back to writing. I focused on writing small pieces such as journal entries and fragments of narrative. It had been years since I had done it. I had no idea where it would take me. However, it was an experience that was exclusively mine for the first time in a long time. A few weeks later, I went to Mom's place to deliver some old documents she had requested. I could hear her talking on the phone in the kitchen, and she wasn't expecting me. She spoke in a stronger tone than usual. She said, No, she still hasn't found a job. She needs to quit being so sensitive, I told her. This was her choice. She wasn't coerced. My throat tightened with each breath. She continued to speak. Honestly, I think she takes pleasure in portraying herself as the victim. Come on, I mean, she pretends to have saved the entire family. I was motionless in the hallway with a manila packet in my hand. My face was burning. My hands became icy. That's how she perceived me then. The daughter did not sacrifice years of her life to care for her dying spouse, not as the one who, out of obligation, gave up her future. However, she did so as a pitiful youngster, pretending to be a martyr. I said nothing whatsoever. After placing the envelope on the hall table in silence, I left. I did cry that night, but not in the shattered, desperate way I usually did. These were not the same tears. They were chilly, concentrated, managed. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with someone who just didn't get it. I had to deal with someone who refused to understand. I had completed my plea for attention. I began compiling a list. This is a real-life list. This was recorded in a budgeting journal that I previously used. I wrote, what they took to the top. I began listing the number of years I had lost. I listed all the jobs I had rejected. I had erased all the memories from my past. I spent every penny I had on supplies, medicine, and travel. I stayed up every night to check on Dad's breathing. To maintain harmony in a house that never seemed like mine, I put all of my dreams on hold. The list had grown to 4 pages by the end of the evening. I turned to a new page after that. I wrote, what shall I reclaim at the top? Retaliation wasn't the point. Not precisely. The topic was realignment. It was about reclaiming the control I had relinquished over the course of a lifetime. I phoned a former coworker I had always respected and who had always had faith in my abilities. She picked up, sounding kind but astonished. She said, I've been hoping you'd call when I inquired if she had time to get coffee sometime. I began revising my resume. I stopped receiving family email chains. I removed social networking apps that only displayed well-curated accounts of people who had never included me. Despite telling myself that I didn't have time, I decided to enroll in therapy. In that peaceful office with soft lighting and a woman who never once encouraged me to stop being so emotional or to smile more, I began to unload everything I had carried. One thing my therapist said stuck with me: you never let them down. They didn't respect you. I went to the bank one afternoon to look at some documents related to the house. Since Dad's name was on every document, I continued to be responsible for the majority of the financial duties. The clerk scowled as she brought up the files. "That's odd," she remarked. "It appears that a joint account was just made, alongside your brother." My heart pounded with excitement. "Which account?" I inquired. She gave me a demonstration. "A fresh savings account linked to a portion of Dad's previous retirement fund's remaining funds." That was never my permission. 3 weeks have passed since it launched. By Mom, Max too. They had made use of my data, my access, my confidence. Someone had robbed me, once more. I went out of the bank into the glaring sun after thanking the clerk. That was it. At that moment, everything inside of me froze. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't upset. I maintained my focus. They believed that I was still the helpless girl. Who would yield? Take a break, but don't leave. What they were unaware of was that I had it already. I didn't immediately approach them. No. I'd been gaslighted and told I was being overly emotional after raising my voice, asking questions, and attempting to comprehend. I have no intention of playing the game ever again. I moved silently this time. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer the morning after learning about the account. Her workspace was compact and effective. She had a crisp tone and soft eyes that gave you a sense of security and protection. "Do you have documentation?" she inquired calmly after I described everything. "Emails? Paper trails? Is there anything that directly connects you to the misappropriated funds?" I took a folder out. I have taken out a folder containing account access documents, bank records, and even a screen grab of a text message. Mom sent me 6 months ago, asking me to sign it quickly. It's to cover Dad's medical expenses. I didn't question it at the moment. Naturally, I didn't. I had faith in her. My attorney gave a slow nod. "You've had enough." That same afternoon, we formally investigated financial exploitation of my identity and submitted the first legal notice. The notice was formal, quiet, and strong. Thereafter, I changed the house's locks. Yes, my name was still on it. Although I had signed much of it over for practical reasons, they had insisted that I preserve the title in my name for tax purposes. They simply didn't think I would recall that particular information now. The key wasn't working when Mom arrived the following day. I looked out my window and saw her try. She gave a call. I allowed it to ring. As she rang the doorbell, I saw her bewilderment gradually turn to rage. I didn't respond. Rather, I sat with a cup of tea on the couch and had a sensation I hadn't had in years: control. I wasn't mean. Someone posted a message on the door: "Please contact me in writing from now on. My attorney is reviewing every situation." Brief, straightforward, emotionless. The group conversation blew up that evening. My phone began to glow brightly. My brother texted me 6 times. "What's happening? Have you replaced the locks? Really? You are acting irrationally. Mom is in tears. You're destroying everything. Adult up." I didn't respond to any of them. Mom attempted a new strategy 2 days later. She left a grocery bag including bread, milk, eggs, and some of Dad's favorite crackers on my porch. Inside was a note that read, "If you're upset, I apologize. Let's just put all of the drama behind us. We share a common bond, no recognition, no justification. Don't apologize. This is just a brief, passive message to help me get back on track." I discarded the bag. I disposed of every single piece. I began packing that evening. I am not in a panic. I am not in a hurry. I stacked my clothes neatly after folding them. I organized the files. I gave away furniture that I no longer needed. I discovered a tiny flat just outside the city in a district I used to enjoy passing through when I had free time. It was simple, but it had a balcony that was small enough to fit a chair, a plant of herbs, and windows that let in early light. I owned it. I also kept my departure a secret from everyone. I left a little folder on the kitchen table on my last morning there. There was a letter from my lawyer, a copy of the legal investigation, and a post-it note that read, "I know what you did. It's not over yet." No signature, no farewell. I drove off after dropping the house keys in the mailbox. Max made 5 calls that afternoon, then 10, then 17. In a tearful voicemail, my mother expressed her inability to comprehend the situation and the reason behind my aloof demeanor. I didn't respond. It wasn't that I was cold. I had completed my task. Furthermore, the purpose of the silence was to heal me, not to harm them. A week went by. I then received an email from a longtime companion, someone who had moved away, established a career, and read my short tales when I used to post them online, but with whom I hadn't communicated in years. Her message was straightforward. "In a contest lineup, I noticed your name. You've been shortlisted. Well done." I gazed at the display. It isn't possible. I clicked on the link. It was there. My name. 3 months ago, I submitted a short piece that, half as a joke and half as a last-ditch effort to remember who I was, had advanced to the finals of a national writing contest. I refrained from crying. I grinned. I then opened a fresh document and brewed a cup of coffee. The words came naturally for the first time in years. My phone buzzed once more as I was typing. It was Max this time. "We need to chat, that's all." I refrained from opening it. Rather, I muttered to myself, "Not anymore," as I gazed at my screen's flickering cursor. They were unaware that the version of me they had previously controlled had vanished, and they would never have predicted what was going to happen next. The sense of silence in my new location seemed odd. However, it didn't cause any emotional distress. After holding your breath for too long, the silence felt like a deep sigh. I worked on my writing. I would sit down with a cup of coffee every morning and just talk. No one called my name. Nobody barged in demanding assistance. This was not a one-time request to abandon everything. However, that did not imply that the hurricane was over. Max's email became 2 in 1. Next, 3. Then a call came in from a blocked number. I didn't answer any of those calls. I waited until the letter arrived. Accredited. The item was delivered to my new flat. An official invitation to Dad's will reading has been sent. It nearly made me chuckle. Did they just recall that I was a member of the family after all the times they disregarded me, discarded me, and called me too sensitive? I went because I was curious more than anything. This is not for the sake of peace. The intention is not to shout. It's just about being present. Smelling of old books and more recent disappointment, the lawyer's office was located in a downtown building. Wearing all black and with an expression of feigned sadness, my mother sat in the waiting area. Max stood next to her, out of sight. I sat down opposite them. Nobody spoke. The attorney came in, sharp and direct. After taking out the documents, she started reading the will. Max had inherited nearly everything from Dad. The home, the vehicle. This is the combined savings account. Max had never even touched Dad's old collection of first edition literature, which he and I used to discuss for hours on end. Not until the very end was my name mentioned. The lawyer read, "The lawyer addressed his daughter, who has consistently been trustworthy." That was it. Nothing. No property. It merely exists as a line. The adjective used is ambiguous. It was painless. Yes, it hurt, but it didn't crush me as I had expected, since I was previously aware. When the insurance expired, I had been paying for some of his treatments out of my own resources, which Dad was unaware of, and Mom made sure he never heard. "We covered it through other channels," she told him. He thought she was real. He did, of course. They were unaware of the fact that I had proof. I put a folder on the table after reaching into my bag. My lawyer nodded as he sat calmly beside me. According to her, this is a formal challenge to the will. This is due to financial abuse, coercion, and deception. Max tensed. Mom blinked. I bent over. I said in a steady, even voice, "I didn't come here to beg. I arrived to rectify a falsehood." My lawyer spoke before Mom, who was about to fight. "We have records of the account being misused, fake signatures, and medical bills associated with an account that your daughter, the customer, did not legally approve." Max went white. The attorney went on, "If a court case arises, this will become public knowledge." Additionally, she registered this property in her name to avoid paying taxes. A long, terrible hush fell. When things didn't go her way, Mom often acted as the victim. How could you harm your family in this way? Her eyes were wide with feigned pain as she spoke. I didn't wince, I said. I looked after Dad. I made sacrifices to further my career, my funds, my life. Once he was gone, you turned around and referred to me as a burden. I got up. I don't require your shame. All I desire is what's rightfully mine. I then walked out of the room. However, it didn't stop there. Max arrived at my residence a week later. I refused to let him in. We communicated via the security intercom. He added in a trembling voice, "We didn't mean for things to get this far. Are we unable to communicate?" "When you used my name on that account, did you speak with Dad?" I inquired. "Quiet. This is not my opinion. I was already convinced." But he muttered something about attorneys, the media, and not putting the family through this. I pushed the disconnect button. I put something online that night. All I uploaded was a single picture. The image is simple and clear, with a group of young women holding a banner that said, "Reclaiming Our Voices in Workshop Graduation." I stood in front of a community center. It quietly went viral. People noticed it, but it didn't garner headlines or millions of views. I shared it with my former instructors, college friends, and even distant family members. The remarks were nice. "You always said something impactful. You've gone a long way. You have my admiration." Then, late at night, a comment from an unfamiliar account showed up. "Your father would have been pleased. Don't allow them to change it." I had no idea who it was. It could have been someone from the former hospice. Perhaps there was someone who could have remembered us. However, it made me realize why I had battled. I am not here to exact revenge. I just want to be clear. I am writing this for the truth, for harmony. That's when I realized it wasn't over yet. At last, someone was taking me seriously. Like a little crack in a window, it started off barely perceptible but developed more quickly than anyone anticipated. My lawyer was notified that the financial records had been approved for preliminary review 2 weeks after the will challenge was submitted. Nothing noteworthy. It was only a small, silent gap in a deafening wall. However, a short time later, Mom's charitable foundation underwent an audit. Then, in an article concerning possible inheritance conflicts, Max's name was included. Finally, the family residence received a letter from the county office stating that all property transactions had been put on hold while the matter was investigated. Thereafter, I got a nice silence from them. I had been choking under the burden of duty for years. "Since you are the oldest among us, it is your responsibility to take care of things while Max is away, either in Buenos Aires or Bali." Right now, it was they who were frantically trying to explain. First, the rumors began in the church. I take it that she resigned from her work to care for her father? I assumed she had been residing there the entire time. For what reason would they exclude her? The direction of events was changing. I didn't make a giant speech. I did not seek retribution. However, the fact that people were paying more attention for the first time was significant, and what they witnessed did not sit well with them. Max gave me another call. I haven't responded yet. Instead, I donated the final check from my father's medical reimbursements to the nearby community hospice in his honor. No cameras. There was not a single word spoken, a simple thank you. However, word still spread. One afternoon, I got a bouquet of lilies from an unknown sender with the following note: "Having you was a blessing for him." Some people simply do not understand the importance of loyalty until it is too late. I started crying. It wasn't the Hollywood type of crying, nor was it the loud kind. It was just a quiet, gentle ache that poured over and went through me. There were other factors involved besides inheritance and money. The goal was to stand out, heard, I thought, and at last I was. On the other side, Mom began to appear once more. It started out as a text: "Let's have a conversation. We've had enough of this." Next came a voicemail: "I have no idea why you're acting in this way. We share a connection." Afterwards, she showed up at the community center, complete with cosmetics. Instead of entering a place where half of the population had buried a loved one, she dressed as though she was off to brunch. She brought a dessert, literally. Scribble family first in crimson icing across the top of one of those grocery store sheet cakes. I waited for her at the door and refused to let her in. What are you doing? Her voice was sharp but quiet as she inquired. You're portraying us as monsters, I said. You made yourselves look like that. I simply stopped keeping the mask safe. She blinked. She appeared as though she hadn't considered that possibility. She repeated, I brought cake, as if it had some significance. I said, I'm allergic to red food dye before turning around and entering again, people noticed. They also showed respect for it. Here's a silent nod. There was a knowing smile. When I was playing the quiet assistant, I never received the kind of recognition I now receive. One of Dad's old pals sent me a note later that evening. A straightforward line, you didn't disappoint him. Don't let your story be about their embarrassment. And I didn't. Rather, I resumed my writing. Not for myself alone. I began educating people on how to transform their sorrow into something complete, something deserving. Tales, poems. No letters were ever sent. A letter was written by a woman in the factory to her brother, who did not attend their mother's funeral. A poem called Invisible Granddaughter was recited by another. It really got to me, because I came to a realization. I had devoted so many years to proving myself to those who were determined to never see it. People were all around me now, and they saw it before I could say anything. That was the distinction. It was therapeutic. That was liberation. I was also only starting to taste it. I didn't make a move to support my argument. It was finally time, so I relocated. It was a small one-bedroom flat above a bookshop that smelled of paperbacks and cinnamon. It was mine, though. Silence. Not the hurting sort, but the kind that envelops you like a blanket after a long day, filled every square inch of it. There were no voices in the hallway asking me to be thankful. No subtle jabs concealed under phony worry. Just a fresh start, my books, and me. When I first woke up there, I brewed coffee, threw open the window, and listened to the silence. No charges. Have no expectations. Not guilty. I realized then that it had been years since I had heard my own thoughts. They were also stunning. I resumed my part-time job with a nonprofit organization that provided assistance to caregivers. I couldn't help but notice the irony. However, I brought wisdom, not suffering, to the position. I was versed in the language of quiet sorrow. I understood what it was like to give your all and still be ignored. Therefore, the first didn't encourage the women in my group to be strong when they started crying. I informed them that they were all ready. I occasionally received texts from Max. I didn't respond to most of them. He once emailed me a screenshot of an article including a thumbs-up emoji that was about my work. Don't apologize. No recognition. A silent endeavor to change the course of history. I let it read. That year, Mom sent a holiday card. As though she had just realized that she only had one child who could still be open to listening, it was directed to my daughter. It simply read, I hope you're doing well within. You are missed. After reading it once, I threw it away. You can't miss someone you didn't make an effort to keep. The irony was that my anger had subsided. I didn't despise them. I simply didn't require them. I came to the conclusion that this type of healing was the most hazardous, because you start to become someone they can't control once you stop wanting approval from others who make fun of you. They're frightened by that. I ran into an old neighbor at the market one afternoon. She gave me a long look before grinning. You appear lighter, she remarked. You like peace. And it did. I had never before noticed my laugh lines. When someone raised their voice, I didn't flinch. When I heard the word family, I stopped holding my breath. Dad was still on my mind. Not anymore, not with suffering, simply with love. He was unaware of the severity of the situation. He had relied on Mom to be honest with him. He was unaware of what she was stealing from me and transforming me into. However, I was certain that he would have been pleased with my departure, how I decided to live rather than merely get by. Each of us contributed a single statement that encapsulated our trip during the year's last writing workshop. I hesitated when it came to me. Next, I said. I formerly believed that love required selflessness for the benefit of others. I now understand that true love doesn't require you to vanish. There was silence in the room. Some of them sobbed, and I grinned. because my narrative was no longer the only one. They also owned it. To everyone who has been told they are too emotional, too self-centered, too sensitive, or too much hear me out, you are sufficient. You're not invisible. Furthermore, it is not treachery to leave people who don't value you. It marks the start of your independence. Peace was preferable to proving myself, and the best retaliation was that.